But I want to welcome in a guy that's been on the show many times before over the years. Always good to have him on. Pete Sepp, who is the president of the National Taxpayers Union Foundation. He joins us now. Pete, first of all, thanks for joining us. It's been a long time. It's good to have you back on.
Well, thanks for having me on again. We'll make it a shorter time next time around.
I like that. Now, you folks have been really busy. You've got a new report from the Taxpayers Union Foundation that finds that the top 10 states in net inbound migration gained roughly 384,000 households. That is incredible. Are people voting with their feet when it comes to taxes?
Oh, they certainly are. And this trend has been going on for a while, but it's actually accelerating as sort of the red-blue state divide occurs and tax policies come into sharper focus. People are tending to move south and west in the United States if taxes are a concern of theirs. They go to no-income tax states, places like Nevada and Texas and Florida. They also go, though, to lower tax states, places like Utah from California or Indiana from Illinois. So there's a whole lot of interplay going on here, and folks are saying when they do the financial comparisons, taxes really do matter, and I can live someplace else and be just as happy and a little better off for it.
What about Nevada? Nevada is one of these states that we're talking about here. Can you talk a little bit about what you know about Nevada?
Well, Nevada, of course, has made the wise decision of not imposing an income tax on its citizens. That's been very helpful for California refugees. They not only go to Utah, they go to Nevada. There's, of course, a lot of controversy over property tax in Nevada because there's not a whole lot of privately owned land necessarily to tax versus many other states. And, of course, Nevada also made the wise decision of imposing a supermajority tax limit, meaning that in order to increase taxes, you've got to find an extraordinary majority of lawmakers in the legislature, not just a simple majority, in order to enact it. I can tell you that constitutional tax limitations are a key in many states for keeping taxes moderate, so that whatever the politicians are, whatever party they are, whatever philosophy they are, and goodness knows Nevada has had its tax hiking Republicans in the past, the Constitution stands in front of them to say, wait a minute, you have to come to a consensus before you impose heavier burdens on your own citizens. It's worked in Nevada, it's worked in Colorado, and thank goodness this is an important election result you won't see reported everywhere. Coloradans were faced with a choice last night of weakening one of the best tax limits in the country, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. They overwhelmingly rejected it. They kept that limit in place. That's a really good piece of news for taxpayers in this election.
I want to ask you about folks in blue states, the leaders of blue states. Do they see these numbers? Do they connect the dots that there is a correlation between taxation and people coming and going?
Some do, but they just don't care. They often say, well, good riddance if taxes are your only concern. We have a better quality of life here. We have better health care, better unemployment benefits, better education. The problem is the statistics don't necessarily confirm that either. If you take a look again at Colorado, they have some of the best health indices in the country because they have good programs and people who value health care and take care of themselves. Utah has some of the best schools in the country, but they don't spend even half as much as New York does per pupil. So the correlation isn't that neat. And unfortunately, blue state leaders don't get that. And, you know, they also pile on lots of regulatory policies. We're seeing this in some of the lawsuits that they're engaging in against various industries. The tech industry is a favorite target of many state attorneys general. That's the suits against Google and Amazon. And they're joining with the federal government to make really exotic arguments in court that have very little to do with consumer welfare and a whole lot to do with protecting competitors who are disgruntled that somebody is higher up on the ladder than they are.
Again, joining us, Pete Sepp, the president of the National Taxpayers Union Foundation. Explain what the National Taxpayer Union Foundation is, what it does, the mission statement.
Yes, we provide research, analysis, as well as show citizens how they can become active taxpayers, involved taxpayers in the decisions their governments make from the local level all the way up to the federal level. We are concerned not only with taxes, but also government budgets, regulations, these lawsuits that are occurring willy-nilly all over the place, attempting to restructure our economy. I mean, that's the thing we need to watch in this country, is how liberals pull the levers of power that they don't necessarily have but are able to manipulate. They use the courts in very deceptive ways. If they don't control the U.S. House of Representatives, they shove through regulations that have almost the same effect as laws through the executive branch. We need to be very careful about that.
The NTU has been very, very busy, as we mentioned. What is the involvement of the NTU in the Department of Justice lawsuit against folks like Google and Microsoft?
Yeah, we've been involved in these issues for the better part of 30 years because taxpayers have a huge stake in them. The fact is that if governments are able to reward competitors, tip the thumb on the scales, so to speak, that means no industry is safe from the federal government or state and local governments doing this. They're spending tax dollars on these lawsuits when attorneys general, and polls show this, that the public believes that attorneys general should be focusing on things like prosecuting crimes, policing fraud, and price gouging, not taking companies to court because some other company says that they've been unfairly treated. And our concern is that if this kind of litigation continues, the innovation for which our economy is known is going to slow. We are going to lose out to other countries like China and governments themselves, which benefit from these technologies, everything from cloud data storage to internet service provisions. Those kinds of things are going to start to dry up in the future, and governments are going to become even less efficient with tax dollars. We need to stop this trend. We need to go back to the principles of antitrust law, as it's called, which meant that consumers, their welfare, that standard needs to be upheld. We can't have these lawsuits where basically billionaires are encouraging the federal government to sue other billionaires to settle their scores. That's not the way antitrust law is supposed to work. We, the consumers, should come first, and these suits against Google and Amazon are so far away from being about consumers. We need to be very concerned.
The DOJ claims this is an antitrust lawsuit, although what it ultimately does is pit Microsoft and Google against each other. Can you talk a little bit about what this lawsuit is and what it isn't?
Yeah, the suit originally was a group of states, nearly 3 dozen of them, and the federal government's Department of Justice Antitrust Division launching a suit in 2020 against Google, for example, alleging 7 different counts of what they called anti-competitive behavior. Well, when the case was about to go to trial, the judge in the case narrowed those 7 arguments down to just 3. The judge threw out 4 of the arguments because they were absolutely frivolous. I mean, one of them was a claim from several folks, TripAdvisor and Yelp, saying that their search results in Google weren't being depicted in the way they wanted, and so that was anti-competitive. Well, the judge fortunately didn't buy that. Now they're focusing on 3 contentions, the biggest one being that there was an agreement between Google and Apple to have Google's search engines preloaded on Apple's devices. And Microsoft and others are saying, well, that's anti-competitive. You can't do that. We deserve the same leg up as someone else like Apple, who concluded an agreement with Google and paid to have this agreement go forward. Well, stores do that all the time. If you want your product on the shelves displayed prominently, you enter into an agreement with the store to do that. Folks don't seem to understand, in the government at least, that this is the kind of way that business gets done. And ultimately, if this case is going to move forward in court, the government has to prove that consumers are being harmed by this. And they're having a very difficult time doing that because obviously Google's search engine is free. And the data that Google might collect, well, that has some kind of value to it, but certainly not in the way that the government is portraying it. And so I don't think that the government is going to be able to clear these hurdles if the judge in the case, who's been pretty sensible so far, sees the law and remembers that this is all about consumers, not competitors.
Pete, if folks want to know more about what you're up to at the National Taxpayers Union Foundation and all the good work that you're doing, where can they find you?
They can visit us online at NTU, our initials for National Taxpayers Union, NTU.org.
Pete, always good to visit with you. Thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Have me back soon.
I like that idea. Pete Sepp, the president of the National Taxpayers Union Foundation, whenever we get into things about who pays the most taxes, who's paying their fair share, we always go to Pete Sepp. Good guy. Pete Sepp, the president of the National Taxpayers Union Foundation.